A young man was playing on his computer when he noticed something he had thought about before. The mothers in the game seemed much more beautiful and captivating than the heroines themselves. As he watched the scene, a mature-looking woman with a charming smile caught his attention more than any other character. A woman with an elegant appearance and confident expression introduces herself with a charming smile. She mentions that she has heard of the young man through her daughter, showing familiarity. With a welcoming gesture, she introduces herself as Maniana, radiating a striking and captivating presence. In an intense confrontation, a young man with light hair faces Maniana, who shows great skill and confidence in her movements. The clash of attacks between the two generates shockwaves around them. With a carefree smile, she acknowledges her opponent's skill, maintaining a firm stance. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a hand moves toward a card, suggesting a parallel action occurring outside the battle. Maniana is surprised while taking a bath, reacting with a scream as she notices the unexpected presence of someone. Her face shows a mix of surprise and embarrassment as the water runs down her body. Soon after, she adopts a provocative expression, with a suggestive smile, displaying confidence in the situation. Meanwhile, a distinct and mysterious scene unfolds elsewhere, suggesting a parallel event. Maniana is severely wounded, with blood streaming down her face as she maintains a melancholic gaze and a weak smile. Her words express regret, as if carrying an emotional burden in her final moments. Her trembling hand reaches toward the keyboard, while someone nearby screams in desperation. The scene conveys a tragic and intense moment, suggesting an impactful conclusion. A young man expresses his frustration and sadness upon seeing a character's tragic fate in the game. Desperate, he wonders why such a captivating mother had to die, crying out in anguish. Meanwhile, his phone emits a notification sound, revealing a message from the game developers, bringing an unexpected element to the situation. The protagonist, an ordinary office worker, anxiously checks his phone, hoping the developers of the game have responded to his request for a route where mothers can be saved. However, upon discovering that the update only added a new event for the heroines, he bursts in frustration, questioning why they continue to ignore the mothers. Desolate, he slams into the desk, discontent with the developer's decision. Tears roll down his face as he protests the game, revealing his intense devotion to the maternal characters. The game Magia Fantasia, also known as Mamafan, is an 18+ RPG that combines elements of fantasy, magic, and combat with a narrative set in an academy. Despite its adult content, it has gained many hardcore players due to its well-developed gameplay and praised RPG aspects. The story follows the classic fantasy setting, with warriors wielding swords and mages casting spells, all within an environment full of erotic elements. The heroines, each with their distinct personalities, are one of the main attractions of the game, but there is one aspect that truly sets the title apart. Although the heroines are a major draw, what truly stands out is the impressive cast of mothers. These charismatic characters appear throughout the story and capture attention with their striking presence. However, there is great frustration for some players. They are only treated as side characters, without independent routes in the main narrative. Even as sub-heroines, their charm and personalities captivate, especially for those with a particular fondness for maternal characters. Despite the great charisma of the mothers in the game, most of them face tragic fates. Many are brutally murdered, poisoned, devoured by dogs, or fall into the hands of cruel enemies. Some die while trying to protect the protagonist and the heroines, discarded without much significance to the main story. Meanwhile, the protagonist devotes himself to protecting the heroines, putting his life on the line for them. His heroic actions ensure that the main characters receive a worthy ending, while the mothers, on the other hand, are given deaths devoid of impact or meaningful development. The protagonist, frustrated, complains while typing furiously on the keyboard, outraged by the lack of attention the mothers receive in the game. Despite numerous requests from the community, especially his own, for the mothers to have their own routes, the developers continue to ignore this possibility. Meanwhile, one of the maternal characters, dressed in an uncomfortable school uniform, expresses her dissatisfaction with the outfit choice. She believes the costume would look much better on the mothers in the game, reinforcing the frustration with the developer's excessive preference for younger heroines. Despite his outrage, the protagonist realizes he is part of a minority. The game remains extremely popular, but the public's preference continues to focus on the schoolgirl heroines, leaving the maternal characters he admires behind. The protagonist remains frustrated, reflecting on how both the game developers and the hero of the story abandon the mothers. In his mind, if he were the protagonist, he would do everything in his power to save them. Despite his indignation, reality calls him back. He finishes the game but without achieving the change he sought. Resigned, he sighs and prepares to follow his routine, descending the stairs of his apartment to go to work, carrying his frustration with him. The protagonist abruptly falls onto a luxurious bed, his body stunned by the impact. Confused, he opens his eyes and finds himself in an unfamiliar environment, different from his usual world. The grand building in the background, with its refined architecture, indicates that he is no longer where he should be. As he tries to understand what happened, his mind is filled with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. The protagonist awakens in an opulent room, decorated in a refined Western style. Still confused, he tries to understand where he is and remembers falling down the stairs before ending up there. As he surveys the environment, a strange sense of familiarity bothers him. Upon noticing a large portrait on the wall, he is surprised. The painting depicts an elegant woman with a child, which sends his mind racing. The possibility begins to form in his thoughts. Could it be that he has been transported into the game? The door suddenly opens, and a stunning woman enters the room with a concerned expression. Her elegant dress and captivating presence immediately capture the protagonist's attention, causing him to freeze upon recognizing her. She asks if he is okay, mentioning that she heard his screams. Stunned, he widens his eyes, feeling his heart race. The woman before him is no stranger, he recognizes her immediately. His mind goes into shock as he realizes that he is standing before one of the mothers from the game. The protagonist quickly recognizes the woman in front of him, Rosa, one of the mothers from the game Fan. The realization hits him, and he understands that somehow, he has been transported into the world of the game he played so much. Observing Rosa from a distance, he confirms that there is no doubt he is truly inside the world of Magia Fantasia. The surprise soon gives way to excitement, and he begins to process what this means. The idea of being immersed in the game excites him, but at the same time, an unsettling thought begins to surface in his mind. Something is still not quite right. The protagonist approaches the mirror and freezes when he sees his own reflection. Rosa called him Demonio, and looking at his appearance, he immediately recognizes the face in the mirror. It's a character from the game. The shock causes him to break out in a cold sweat. Demonio is not just any minor character, he is one of the villains in the story, someone he never imagined being. Desperation takes over as he realizes the gravity of the situation. Among all the possibilities, this is the last identity he wanted to assume. The protagonist finally understands his new identity within the game, Demonio Tridol, an arrogant and cruel aristocrat. Known for his exceptional magical abilities, he is also remembered for his coldness and disdain for others. As a typical villain in the story, he constantly clashed with the hero, a peasant who challenged the noble system. Despite his power, Demonio was ultimately defeated when he tried to face the protagonist, sealing his fate as a disposable antagonist. Now, trapped in this unwanted role, the protagonist realizes that his situation is even worse than he imagined. The protagonist recalls the inevitable fate of Demonio Tridol in the game. Regardless of the chosen route, the villain always succumbed to his own power, lost control, and met a terrible death. His defeat was a fixed event in the story, without exception. Now, trapped in this body and aware of the tragic end that awaits him, he panics. He has finally entered the world of Fan, but if he doesn't do something quickly, he will end up following the same cruel fate as Demonio. Determined to avoid a bad ending, he needs to figure out a way to change his future. The protagonist is still in shock over his new identity and the cruel fate awaiting him. However, his attention is quickly diverted when Rosa approaches, concerned about his pale appearance. Her soft voice and gentle expression contrast with the whirlwind of emotions he feels. Upon hearing his name being called, he instinctively reacts, surprised and relieved to see her. Rosa's comforting presence calms him momentarily, bringing an unexpected sense of tranquility. However, he knows he can't let himself be swayed. He needs to find a way to survive in this world before it's too late. The protagonist discovers that Rosa Tridol, the woman before him, is his stepmother within the game. Although she is a secondary character with little involvement in the main story, she is extremely popular among some players, especially him. Visibly concerned, Rosa apologizes for entering without warning, explaining that she only wanted to check if he was okay after hearing his scream. Her kind and attentive manner contrasts with the protagonist's initial view of his new identity as a villain. While she hesitates, embarrassed by her intrusion, he realizes that he may have an unexpected ally within this world. The protagonist notices that Rosa seems uneasy, as if frightened. Her wavering gaze catches his attention, and he wonders what might be causing this reaction. Suddenly, Rosa recovers and tries to downplay the situation, offering a warm smile. She assures him that there is no reason to worry and takes the blame for the incident, gesturing lightly to dispel any tension. Her carefree attitude contrasts with her earlier expression, leaving the protagonist even more curious about what's really going on. Suddenly, intense memories invade the protagonist's mind. He sees flashes of Demonio Tridol's past, revealing the deep hatred he had for Rosa. In one of these moments, Demonio yells at her, accusing her of only being interested in his father's money. The scene shows a fragile and frightened Rosa, while he treats her with cruelty. The protagonist is shocked as he realizes these memories belong to the real Demonio before his reincarnation. According to the original storyline, Demonio lost his biological mother at a young age, and perhaps as a way to cope with the pain, he began to despise Rosa with all his soul. Another memory unfolds, showing Demonio pouring a glass of liquid over Rosa, who remains kneeling on the floor, humiliated. The cruelty of the past strikes him like a shock. Now, he understands why Rosa looks at him so apprehensively. She still sees him as the same arrogant and relentless young man who always despised her. Despite the hatred and disdain Demonio showed, Rosa never stopped treating him as her son. Even though she was constantly rejected, she continued to express her maternal love, trying to be a gentle and welcoming presence in his life. In the most tragic moment of the original story, when Demonio had already lost himself to his arrogance and power, Rosa risked her own life to protect him. During the final battle against the protagonist, she stepped in front of the blade, pleading for him not to kill her stepson. The protagonist, now reincarnated as Demonio, absorbs these memories with a mix of shock and guilt. He realizes that Rosa always cared for Demonio, even when he treated her cruelly. Knowing this only strengthens his resolve. He cannot follow the same path as the original Demonio. He must change his fate. The protagonist relives the cruelest scene in the game, Rosa's inevitable fate. In all of Mamathan's routes, Demonio's stepmother always meets a tragic end. At the height of his corruption, the very Demonio, blinded by hatred and power, thrusts his blade through her, ignoring her pleas and attempts to protect him. Rosa's body falls lifeless, a fixed fate that never changes, regardless of the player's choices. Reliving this memory, the protagonist feels a pang in his chest. Now, knowing the truth and the unconditional love Rosa always had for Demonio, he cannot allow this tragedy to repeat. The protagonist, now aware of Demonio's cruel past, despairs as he realizes how much Rosa suffered because of him. With tears in his eyes, he grips her hands tightly and repeatedly apologizes, feeling the weight of everything Demonio did to her. Rosa, surprised by his sudden change in attitude, simply watches as he blames himself, calling himself trash for everything Demonio did. Determined to change his relationship with her, he tries to justify his previous behavior, claiming that his rebellious phase was just a way to get closer to her. Embarrassed, he looks away, trying to hide his shame, but now determined to do something different, to take care of Rosa and ensure that her tragic fate does not repeat. The protagonist, still emotionally shaken, lets out a mother while addressing Rosa, instinctively calling her the same way he used to while playing. The impact of the word surprises her, leaving her visibly emotional, while he realizes his mistake too late. In panic, he spirals into despair, fearing that he has ruined everything. His face turns bright red as he realizes he spoke without thinking. Trying to correct himself, he quickly apologizes, believing that calling her mother may have made her uncomfortable. Rosa, on the other hand, covers her face, but she doesn't seem upset. On the contrary, there's something in her expression that suggests his words touched her deeply. Overcome with emotion, Rosa rushes to embrace Demonio, tears of happiness in her eyes. For her, being called mother means that she has finally been recognized as part of the family, something she always wanted but never managed to achieve in the past. The protagonist, still trying to process the situation, is completely surprised by Rosa's warm reaction. Not knowing how to handle the tight embrace and the sudden shift in atmosphere, he tries to get her attention, but she is too radiant to notice his embarrassment. Now, the relationship between the two takes a new turn. He realizes that, instead of an obstacle, Rosa might be his greatest ally in changing his fate. Rosa, still emotional, hugs Demonio tightly, holding him against her with a warm smile. However, for the protagonist, the situation becomes unexpectedly awkward as he notices the softness and size of her attributes quite intensely. His face turns completely red as he tries to process what is happening, feeling overwhelmed in Rosa's affectionate but overwhelming embrace. His mind goes into alert mode, and he can barely formulate a coherent thought beyond the physical impact. As he freezes in nervousness, Rosa seems completely comfortable, enjoying the moment of closeness without noticing the protagonist's internal conflict. He realizes that, in addition to saving his destiny, he will have to deal with some rather complicated situations from now on. Radiant with happiness, Rosa asks Demonio to call her mother more often from now on. Her warm smile conveys the genuine joy of finally being recognized as part of the family. With a gentle look, she reassures him that she understands his feelings and that she always knew, deep down, that he was a good person. Her words reflect an unwavering trust in Demonio, something he never expected, considering the original character's past. The protagonist, still processing the situation, realizes that Rosa truly accepts him without resentment. This new dynamic between them could be the key to changing the tragic fate that awaits him. Rosa, with a sweet smile, reassures the protagonist that there's no need to rush. She suggests that they build their relationship as a family slowly, allowing things to flow naturally. Her gentle words show her patience and affection, something that touches the protagonist deeply. Before leaving, she bids him a warm goodbye, promising to see him again soon. The protagonist stands still, watching her disappear through the door, reflecting on everything that has happened. He feels surprised and touched by Rosa's tenderness, something that was never acknowledged in the original story. As he processes his emotions, he can't help but think, Rosa is so cute. But soon, this tenderness turns into a weight in his mind. How could such an adorable woman have such a cruel fate? Determined, he reaffirms to himself that he won't let this tragic end happen. The protagonist begins to seriously reflect on his new role in the game. If it was Demonio who killed Rosa in the original story, then now, being him, he can avoid this fate. The possibility of changing the course of the narrative becomes clear to him. But then, an even bigger thought arises in his mind. What if he doesn't just save Rosa, but also all the other mothers in the game? The characters who never had a route where they could survive, those who were always treated as disposable side characters. Perhaps he could change everything with his own hands. His gaze fills with determination. He won't be the same Demonio as before. Now, he has a new goal, to create a future where none of the mothers need to die. The world of Malmagia Fantasia, also known as Mamafan, was marked by heroines facing cruel and inevitable fates. However, some secondary characters, especially the mothers, always went unnoticed by the main plot and the protagonist of the game. Now, with his new determination, the protagonist reincarnated as Demonio refuses to let this cycle of tragedy continue. If the game never gave them a happy ending, he will create one himself. With a resolute look, he prepares to change the story. If the original protagonist saved the heroines, he will save the mothers who never had that chance. The protagonist realizes that sheer willpower won't be enough to change the tragic fate of the mothers. If he wants to rewrite the story and confront the enemies who led these women to cruel ends, he needs power. Determined to strengthen himself, he submits to intense physical and mental training. Under a freezing waterfall, he concentrates, seeking to improve his endurance and self-control. At the same time, he dedicates himself to heavy exercises, strengthening his body for the challenges ahead. He knows that to change the course of the story, he needs enough strength to overcome any adversity and defeat powerful enemies. His goal now is to obtain the power necessary to save all the mothers who were forgotten by the game. The protagonist understands that Demonio may have been a detestable villain, but his talent was undeniable. As a high-ranking noble, he already had money, influence, and great magical potential, factors that could be leveraged to change his fate. Determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past, he dedicates himself to rigorous physical and intellectual training. He spends hours studying, absorbing knowledge that may help him escape the tragic fate that awaits him. At the same time, he trains hard, honing his skills to become strong enough to avoid the villainous path that led to his downfall in the game. If he pushes himself enough, maybe he can change everything and save those who never had a chance. The protagonist finally embraces his new purpose within the world of Mamafan. He recognizes that the original hero may continue saving the heroines, but his destiny now lies elsewhere. He will be the one to save all the mothers who never had their own route. With a confident smile and his dark magic emanating power, he declares his mission, to protect the mothers of this world and rewrite their tragic fates. The figures of the mothers appear around him, symbolizing the goal he has set. He will not be a disposable villain, nor will he follow the path that the game laid out for Demonio. Now, he will become the savior of the characters who were always forgotten. In the midst of a crisis, the Tridal family's peacekeeping unit faces an unexpected threat, a colossal wild bear, much larger and fiercer than the report had indicated. The soldiers question whether they stand a chance against the creature, hesitating in the face of its size and fury. Then, Demonio enters the scene. With a confident posture and sharp gaze, he orders everyone to fall back. His firm and secure tone surprises the soldiers, who quickly recognize his presence as the leader. Now, it is his time to act. He is no longer the arrogant and cruel villain from the original story. He is someone who will rewrite his fate with his own hands. Demonio steps into action, demonstrating the strength he has gained through his training. With a precise movement, he activates a mid-level spell, Black Dance, unleashing a powerful blast of dark magic that strikes the massive wild bear directly. The creature, which had seemed unbeatable, is sent flying through the air by the devastating impact of the spell, spinning violently before crashing heavily to the ground. The surrounding soldiers watch in shock, unable to believe what they have just witnessed. Demonio, on the other hand, remains firm, proving that he is no longer the useless villain doomed to failure in the original game. Now, he has the power to change the destiny and protect those who have been forgotten by the story. The soldiers are stunned as they witness Demonio's feat. With a single blow, he defeated the massive wild beast, something that seemed impossible to them. Impressed, they comment on the unexpected strength of the young master, unable to hide their admiration. Meanwhile, Demonio remains impassive, as if it were just another problem to solve. He is not there for recognition or glory, he is there because he wants to finish the mission quickly and return home to receive Rosa's praise. The image of her complimenting him appears in his mind as his true reward. 2 months have passed since he was reincarnated as Demonio, and his journey as the former villain who now wants to save the mothers of this world is just beginning. The mansion's servants begin to notice a drastic change in Demonio's behavior. Previously, he treated them as mere subordinates, without consideration or respect. Now, however, he seems completely different. Comments arise among the servants. He is training hard, showing an effort he never had before. In addition, he voluntarily helped contain a beast, something unthinkable for the old Demonio. One of the maids even recalls that he helped her recently, remembering the scene with surprise and even a bit of affection. The atmosphere in the mansion begins to change, and the servants begin to see Demonio in a new light, not knowing exactly what caused this transformation. With the head of the house frequently absent, Demonio takes on his responsibilities as interim leader, demonstrating maturity and respectable behavior. His serious and calculated demeanor impresses those around him, reflecting his determination to change the fate he was once doomed to follow. During a meeting, an important deal is struck, with Demonio leading the negotiations firmly and efficiently. Rosa, always by his side, hands over a document to be kept safe, fully trusting in his leadership. Those who once saw him as an arrogant and troublesome noble now recognize his evolution, realizing that he has become a man worthy of respect and admiration. Demonio was sitting formally in a luxurious room, his expression serious as he observed the conversation around him. Rosa, elegant and gentle, rose, bowing slightly before leaving. Her dress flowed as she walked, and her gaze carried a mix of apprehension and respect. As she passed by the old noble sitting at the table, he shot a sharp glance at Demonio, a strange smile forming on his face. Rosa's departure did not go unnoticed. Her slender and graceful body attracted lewd glances from those present, and the old noble, holding a cigar between his fingers, silently expressed his disapproval. There was something dark in his gaze, a judgment hidden behind the smile. Later, Rosa was alone, holding a contract in her hands. Her face expressed surprise and doubt, her eyes analyzing the document. Meanwhile, 2 men conversed in a corner of the room, their smirks and mocking glances showing their disdain for her. They exchanged low comments, as if amused by the situation, insinuating that Rosa was nothing more than an opportunist. To them, her presence in the noble house was just a game of seduction and self-interest. Now the wife of an influential noble, Rosa carried the weight of disdainful gazes from high society. Her humble origins and marriage to the Glenn family made her a constant target of contempt and cruel gossip. Despite the forced smile she tried to maintain, the humiliation she endured day after day was leaving its mark. The old noble, always arrogant, approached her with a sarcastic smile, treating her like a piece of entertainment. His gaze was one of superiority, as though he expected Rosa to accept her position without question. She, however, remained firm, even though inside she was on the verge of collapse. Demonio observed the scene from a distance. His sharp gaze picked up on the tension in the air, Rosa's discomfort, and how others treated her like an object. He understood that, despite her kindness and willpower, Rosa was being crushed by the circumstances. The society around her did not see her as a woman, but as an intruder who didn't belong in that world. Demonio remembered the cruel actions of his previous self and felt hatred for what Rosa had suffered. Now, with his newfound determination, he saw Rosa as a worthy woman, full of strength and love. With energy burning inside him, he vowed to change her fate and protect her at all costs. The atmosphere in the room became tense when the young noble stood up, exuding an aura of uncontrollable fury. The guest's contempt for the woman by his side awakened something within him, bringing forth a dark power. Black flames appeared around him as he glared at the ones responsible for the disrespect, making it clear that he would not tolerate insults directed at the one he now considered his mother. The dark energy manifested in the form of dark chains, which quickly wrapped around the bodies of the insolent nobles. They were lifted from the ground, suffocated by the oppressive strength of the young noble. His eyes glowed with determination as he declared that those who dishonored his mother did not even deserve to keep their heads on their shoulders. The screams of agony echoed through the hall, but he didn't hesitate. After a moment of silence, he ordered them to disappear from his sight. The terror on the faces of the captured nobles made it clear they understood the message. After demonstrating his power and expelling those who had disrespected his mother, the young noble still felt the anger boiling in his chest. The servants and guests recoiled, confused by his unexpected behavior. After all, he should hate her, not protect her. Rosa, still surprised by his reaction, remained silent for a moment. Her soft and worried expression reflected the shock of the situation. The young noble, realizing his impulsiveness, lowered his head and admitted his mistake. He hadn't wanted to lose control, but he couldn't bear to see her humiliated. The tension in the air began to dissipate as he extended his hand to her, demonstrating his commitment to protecting her. Rosa, with a gentle look, understood that something had changed inside him. Rosa, with a radiant smile, embraced the young noble, returning his protection with affection. The sudden proximity between them left the young man visibly unsettled, his heart racing with the unexpected display of affection. He wasn't used to being treated this way, especially by someone he was supposed to despise. However, her tenderness disarmed him completely, making him question his own feelings. As he enjoyed the closeness with Rosa, the young noble found himself completely immersed in the moment, wishing that feeling could last forever. His bond with his stepmother had undeniably become strong, but his mission was still far from over. Determined to protect all the women that the cruel fate of the game condemned, he realized he needed even more power. The weight of his responsibility grew as he envisioned the countless mothers who had been forgotten by the original story. On the horizon, the ruins of a dark future haunted him. He knew that if he didn't act in time, he would be dragged into the same tragic fate as his counterpart in the game. Facing a challenge that didn't directly influence the main story, he realized the importance of this side mission. The legendary treasure of the Glen family, a rare weapon that could only be acquired in this quest, was within his reach. With burning determination in his eyes, he swore to do everything in his power to acquire it. It wasn't just a desire for power, it was a necessity. If he wanted to save that mother and change the cruel fate that awaited her, he needed this relic at all costs. Determined to find the legendary weapon, he advanced through the hidden dungeon, following the instructions he had memorized. Moving quickly through the corridors, he turned right and then left, without hesitation. In front of a guardian statue, he struck mercilessly, reducing it to rubble, an essential step to unlock the path. However, he knew the next room required a different method. This time, the statue had to remain untouched to avoid traps. Winged creatures guarded the ruins around him, but he moved with confidence, every action calculated to achieve his goal flawlessly. He advanced through the dungeon with precision, following only the correct paths to avoid unnecessary confrontations with monsters. This was one of the final challenges of the game, but he knew every shortcut and trap by heart, a result of countless failed attempts in the past. As he progressed, he remembered the times when he played, making mistakes and losing hours of progress. Now, however, his experience guided him without fail. Standing before the last gate, he felt the excitement of flawless progress. His plan was working. Demonio advanced through the hidden dungeon, following the path he had memorized from the game. Avoiding unnecessary confrontations, he focused on reaching the relic at the deepest point. Upon reaching the final chamber, he faced the demon sword Deathpena, sealed by chains and radiating dark energy. He knew that in the game, this blade was powerful, but difficult to use due to its uncontrolled magical amplification effect. However, now, with his knowledge and determination, he was sure it was the perfect weapon for him. He broke the chains and wielded the sword, absorbing its evil energy. The power flowed through his body, strengthening his dark magic and solidifying his path as the savior of the mothers of this world. The protagonist, now in possession of the demon sword Deathpena, faced the treasure guardian, a monstrous creature covered in tentacles and a sinister smile. Despite the imminent threat, he remained confident, as he already knew the creature's attack patterns. The battle began quickly, with the monster delivering a fast strike with one of its tentacles, but the protagonist reacted in time, dodging and counterattacking with his new weapon. The force of the impact caused an explosion of black energy, marking the beginning of a fierce clash. The protagonist barely escaped a devastating attack, shielding himself with his dark barrier at the last moment. The impact of the enemy's strike shattered the wall behind him, demonstrating the brutal strength of the treasure guardian. Reflecting on the situation, he recognized that, despite knowing the mechanics of the game, facing this creature in reality was far more challenging than he had expected. Furthermore, without the game interface, he couldn't see the enemy's health bar, making the fight even more unpredictable. However, he had already made a promise to himself and had no intention of backing down. Determined, he prepared to turn the tide and show the true power of Demonio Tridal. The protagonist faced a great challenge in fighting the treasure guardian. The creature, hanging from the ceiling, proved to be a problematic enemy, with skin that was extremely resistant to both physical and magical attacks. Its movements were swift and hard to predict, making each strike a complicated task. Despite his determination to protect the mothers of this world, he realized that his attacks barely reached the monster. The battle was at a disadvantage for him at the moment, and finding a strategy to overcome this barrier became essential. The protagonist decided to fully exploit Demonio's affinity with dark magic. Knowing that this body had an exceptional ability to manipulate shadows and magical energy, he devised a strategy to use this talent against the treasure guardian. The creature continued its tentacle attacks, but the protagonist waited for the right moment to counterattack. He recognized that, despite Demonio's arrogance in the game, his magical abilities were flawless and could become his greatest advantage in the fight. Now, it was only a matter of seizing the right opportunity to turn the situation in his favor. The protagonist noticed the perfect opening to attack when the Guardian opened its mouth to launch a venomous attack. Knowing that this was his only chance to end the battle, he decided to release all his magic at once. Raising his sword, he concentrated his magical energy and activated a precision technique. With a precise strike, he launched his ability at the vulnerable point of the enemy, determined to end the fight once and for all. The protagonist used his magic to the fullest to face the Sword Guardian. He waited for the exact moment when the creature opened its mouth to unleash a venomous attack and launched his ultimate technique, the Black Spear. The blow struck directly at the monster's weak point, and hidden within its mouth. Thanks to the precision of his spells and the power amplified by the demon sword, he compressed his mana to the limit, increasing the speed and range of the attack. The impact was devastating, eliminating the Guardian with a single blow. Observing the result, he recognized that the Death Pena blade had considerably boosted his power, allowing him to overcome this challenge with ease. The protagonist, after an intense battle, claimed the legendary demon sword Death Pena. With this new power, he felt he was one step closer to saving the women of this world. However, his victory was interrupted by the unexpected appearance of a mysterious woman in black robes, who watched everything with an amused look. She introduced herself enigmatically, mocking the protagonist for his excessive attachment to maternal figures. Surprised and confused, he questioned the identity of this new presence, sensing that his journey might just be beginning. After clearing the dangerous dungeon and acquiring the powerful demon sword, Demonio reflected on the challenges he had faced. While satisfied with his new acquisition, he realized he had gained more than he expected. The world around him, with its medieval aesthetic, still surprised him with modern details like baths, which made him ponder the peculiarities of this universe. Determined to freshen up after the effort, he headed for a bath, only to be surprised when he found Rosa in an unexpected moment. Later, during a quiet dinner under the starry sky, a silence overtook the environment. While Rosa expressed her gratitude for the meal, Demonio remained thoughtful, analyzing everything that had happened up until that point. It seems this scene depicts an awkward moment between the characters, followed by a conversation at the table. The protagonist, after taking a bath, faces an unexpected situation and tries to maintain composure. The dinner seems to be a moment of tension and reflection, with both showing some discomfort. The story emphasizes the peculiar relationship between the two, with the protagonist keeping a serious posture, while Rosa expresses regret and shyness. The scene shows a moment of surprise and admiration from Rosa upon noticing the sword that Demonio brought from the dungeon. He, in turn, seems hesitant while trying to explain the situation. Rosa's gaze reveals astonishment and disbelief when learning that Demonio faced the challenge alone. The mood of the conversation shifts to a more impressed tone, highlighting the protagonist's strength and ability. Rosa shows concern upon recognizing the sword that Demonio brought from the dungeon. She recalls stories about the demon sword Death Pena, a legendary blade associated with dark magic, which had been sealed in the past due to its immense power. While Rosa warns about the danger of using it, Demonio notices that her explanation perfectly aligns with the information in the game. Despite the admiration, her concern is evident, urging him to be careful. Rosa shares an old legend about the demon sword Death Pena, mentioning that the blade has a will of its own and would bring ruin to those it rejected. While Demonio views this story with skepticism, the presence of a mysterious being in the environment raises doubts about the truth of the tale. The atmosphere shifts, bringing an air of mystery and possible danger to the situation. As the enigmatic girl joyfully devours the cookies, Demonio tries to understand her presence. The young woman didn't exist in the game he knew, and her appearance after acquiring the demon sword Death Pena was unexpected. Reflecting, he recalls a vague mention of a cursed soul linked to the blade, a detail that could be connected to the new and mysterious companion now with him. While observing the blade, Demonio realizes that blindly trusting his knowledge of the game was a mistake. What he thought was just a cursed sword with sinister inscriptions revealed itself to be something far more complex. Facing the unexpected presence of the girl connected to the weapon, he decides to name her Pena, a shortened version of Death Pena, thus avoiding a name that directly referenced death. The girl accepts the name naturally, sealing her new identity alongside him. Pena enjoys her newly discovered freedom, experiencing the outside world for the first time in ages. With a mischievous smile, she teases Demonio, calling him Mama's boy and demanding that he entertain her. However, her threat to cast a curse if he annoys her makes it clear that her nature is unpredictable. While Demonio tries to argue that he doesn't have a maternal complex, Pena delights in mocking him, reaffirming that his obsession with mothers is undeniable. Demonio rejects any suggestion that his love for mothers is a complex, considering it his greatest quality. Meanwhile, Pena continues to mock him, intrigued by his peculiar devotion. Determined to act behind the scenes, Demonio realizes that the main storyline will soon begin, and he will encounter many mothers along the way. At 15, he prepares to join the Magic Academy, where nobles begin their formal training. Demonio notices that there is one mother in particular who needs to be saved before the main story begins. If he doesn't act now, it will be impossible to rescue her later. Maria Tanya, one of the strongest characters in the game, is destined for a cruel fate if he doesn't intervene. In addition to being a powerful heroine, she is also extremely popular among the players, including him. Determined to prevent her from being completely subjugated, he prepares to take action before it's too late. Maniana Valhaven, known as the Thunder Witch, is a renowned magical swordswoman. In addition to being one of the heroines of the game Mama Fan, she is also the mother of Monica. Her mastery of both magic and the sword makes her one of the most formidable characters in the story. Maniana Valhaven, also known as Seven Magia, is a former S-rank adventurer and one of the 7 strongest swords in the Royal Knights Order. After her husband's death, she lived with her daughter Monica as a member of the Duke's family. In the game, she appears occasionally in the prologue and is considered the strongest character without direct involvement in the main storyline. Despite her short screen time, Maniana Valhaven gained massive popularity among fans, particularly because of her irresistible charm. During a summer event, her presence was remarkable, but she mysteriously disappears without a trace in the middle of the story, leaving doubts about her fate. Near the northern lands of Turdal, a group of bandits gathers in an abandoned location, discussing their next victim. Among them are murmurs about the Thunder Witch as they express despicable intentions. Watching from a distance, a female figure seems to listen in silence, showing no immediate reaction. The protagonist surveys the ruins in front of him, analyzing the structure and the positioning of the enemies. With the help of his companion, he discovers a secret path beneath the building, confirming his suspicions about Maniana's whereabouts. Everything is happening exactly as he remembered from the game. His ally, pleased with the recognition, takes the opportunity to boast about her usefulness, while he prepares for the rescue mission. The protagonist confirms that his spiritual companion, Pena, is visible only to him, making her a valuable ally for his mission. To ensure her cooperation, he decides to reveal his knowledge of the game and the cruel fate that awaits Maniana. Pena, upon understanding the situation, reinforces her conclusion. He wants to save her before it's too late. Meanwhile, in the enemy hideout, Maniana's figure appears, highlighting the imminent danger. This scene appears to show Maniana's tragic fate, where she regains consciousness after the battle but ends up sacrificing her life to cast a spell. Monica, her daughter, bids her farewell and continues with the protagonist to protect the peace of the world. Meanwhile, a player of the original game reacts indignantly upon seeing this ending, wondering if there is an alternate route where Maniana can be saved. It seems the protagonist decided to act before the main story begins, seizing the opportunity to change Maniana's fate. Meanwhile, a player of the original game becomes frustrated and pleads for a route where Maniana can be saved. This suggests that the protagonist might be trying to create an alternative future to prevent her tragic end. The protagonist, wearing a mask to conceal his identity, prepares to rescue Maniana without leaving a trace. He states that his only goal is to ensure her happiness, asking for nothing in return. Pena finds this noble but somewhat unsettling. Meanwhile, he confirms the positions of the guards based on the information from Pena, planning his stealthy approach. The protagonist uses the dark magic black slave to paralyze the guards, preventing them from moving. Taking advantage of the opening, he quickly advances against the enemies, ready to eliminate them with precision before they can react. The young girl with a childlike appearance watched intently as the magic was used before her. It was basic magic, but the level of power was on another level, something impressive for someone so young. Furthermore, the flow of magic inside the user's body, strengthening them, was flawless. The figure with white hair reflected on the situation, finding it frightening that someone of that age had already mastered such refined skill. Meanwhile, the master pressed on, dismissing the enemies around him, calling them mere lackeys with little importance. The group's destination was an underground location, and the mission continued. At another point, an imposing man with a muscular build and wearing a fur coat looked at someone with a confident smile. He praised the striking presence of the woman before him, calling her by name. In a different setting, a woman was chained to the ground, her clothes torn and her body sweating, demonstrating the physical effort and tension of the situation. With a determined look, she resisted, despite her vulnerable condition. Her captor watched her with interest, recognizing in her a perfect combination of strength and beauty. Inside the underground facility, the atmosphere was filled with silence, interrupted only by the sound of hurried footsteps. Fallen bodies on the ground indicated that a confrontation had occurred there recently. The small observer with light-colored hair expressed her doubt about the situation. To her, it was still hard to understand how someone of Maniana's level, a highly skilled warrior, had been captured by mere bandits. This didn't make sense. The master, maintaining his serious expression, stated that there were deeper reasons for that. Maniana's capture had not been the work of simple criminals, but of high-ranking members of the enemy faction, those at the top of the hierarchy. However, the degrading treatment she suffered did not come directly from these leaders. That part had been left to their subordinates, as if it were beneath their concern. At the height of a dark and twisted scene, a man smiled sinisterly, revealing his obsession with strong and noble women like Maniana. For him, the situation would only make sense if it involved those who stood out for their honor and skill. In his warped vision, this was how the story should unfold. In another part, a writer sat comfortably in his chair, surrounded by bookshelves. His name was Anakichi Ujima, the main author of the work Mama Fan. He described his approach with disturbing words, demonstrating his preference for degrading powerful female characters through despicable and inferior figures. For him, this dynamic was essential to the narrative. Meanwhile, the young master and his companion reflected on this mentality. The small observer simply couldn't understand the purpose behind this idea, while the master coldly analyzed the situation. For him, it was clear that the writer prioritized erotic scenes over the coherence of the story. Maniana was kneeling on the stone floor, her clothes torn and her body marked by fatigue. Her wrists were bound by chains, and her expression revealed frustration as she tried unsuccessfully to use her magic. Something prevented her from accessing her power, making her resistance futile. The man before her watched her with a confident smile, complimenting her appearance even in that humiliating situation. He saw the defeated warrior before him as a pleasing sight, his tone dripping with superiority. Another man, with an imposing posture, explained the reason for Maniana's helplessness. The collar they had placed on her neck not only blocked her magic but also prevented her from strengthening her own body. It was a special technique, an enchantment that eliminated any chance of resistance. The man began to prod the girl using the blade's bomb, saying she was nothing more than a woman with big balloons, and he was sure she wanted a boyfriend right then. As he spoke of the aphrodisiac's effect, another man on the side remarked that she might be a woman with children, but he hadn't expected to get such a good woman, while the other said they had been given permission to do whatever they wanted with her, as long as she remained intact. The woman became very scared as the vile men raised their hands toward her. Maniana recalled the reasons that led her to become a warrior. Her desire had always been to be a strong mother, capable of protecting her daughter from any danger. She also wanted to become stronger in honor of her late husband, maintaining his legacy and ensuring the safety of those she loved. In front of her husband's grave, she reflected on her journey. Her path had not been easy. From the beginning, she faced discrimination for being born a commoner. Even when she entered the Royal Knight's Order, she was constantly belittled, called names, and treated with disdain by those who followed outdated beliefs. Holding her sword firmly, Maniana remembered every obstacle she had overcome. Her goal was not just to be recognized, but to show that her strength came from the determination to protect her family, regardless of the difficulties imposed by society. Maniana faced countless challenges throughout her life, but she always overcame each one with her own abilities. Amidst intense battles, she knocked down powerful opponents, proving her strength and determination. Despite all the difficulties, she never allowed herself to depend on anyone. Without showing weakness, she learned to handle her loneliness and sadness on her own. Her greatest reason to continue was her daughter. For her, Maniana stayed strong, enduring any humiliation and withstanding all the irrational hardships imposed upon her. Now, beside her sleeping daughter, a rare moment of peace filled her heart. The simple sight of the little girl smiling peacefully was enough to remind her that all of her struggles were worth it. The tension in the environment was abruptly broken when a swift strike hit one of the aggressors, forcing him to retreat with a cry of pain as he held his wounded hand. The attack was precise and ruthless, making it clear that a new element had entered the scene. Maniana, still surprised and vulnerable, looked up and widened her eyes as she saw the silhouette of a powerful warrior. Dressed in dark armor with a cold and determined expression, he held his blade firmly, ready to act. The captors, now alert, momentarily retreated in the face of the unexpected threat. One of them, filled with shock and fear, questioned the identity of the newcomer, unable to hide his unease in the presence of the mysterious opponent. The confrontation quickly intensified. The newcomer struck with precision, easily taking down one of the captors. The impact was strong enough to incapacitate the enemy, while the others retreated in shock. Taking advantage of the confusion, one of the men grabbed something valuable and fled hastily. He cursed as he escaped, knowing he couldn't face the mysterious opponent head-on. The warrior noticed the escape attempt and prepared to act. His small companion alerted him that the enemy was carrying something important, increasing the urgency of the situation. Without hesitation, the warrior launched into pursuit, determined to stop the escape and recover what had been taken. The narrow corridor became the next battlefield as the enemy desperately tried to flee. The man tried to escape with a mysterious artifact in hand, but before he could get away, a precise strike hit his leg, making him stumble and fall heavily to the ground. The impact left him dazed, while the object he carried rolled away. Maniana, still bound, watched the scene in surprise, not fully understanding what was happening. Her gaze turned to the warrior in dark armor, whose presence was imposing and threatening to her captors. The fallen enemy crawled back, terrified by the figure in front of him. Desperate, he tried to justify his actions, claiming that he was only following orders from his superiors, who had given him the freedom to do whatever he wanted with the prisoner. The warrior remained silent, his cold gaze fixed on the fallen man. The enemy, in a last effort to save his life, raised the cursed artifact, explaining that it prevented Maniana from using her magic. Trembling with fear, he offered the object to the warrior, hoping that this would be enough to escape his fate. The enemy, now completely cornered, fell to his knees before the warrior in dark armor. In desperation, he extended the artifact and begged for his life, willing to give everything in exchange for mercy. His tone was heavy with fear, aware that he was facing someone relentless. The warrior's small companion watched the scene with indifference, evaluating the act of begging as something pathetic and low-level. With little patience, she urged the warrior to give some response, awaiting his decision on the fate of the pleading man. However, in an instant, the warrior seemed struck by an unexpected wave of confused thoughts. His mind wandered for a moment, and his face turned red, surprising his companion. The sudden reaction took everyone by surprise, creating a brief moment of strangeness amid the tense situation. The warrior didn't hesitate. With a powerful and precise strike, he sent the enemy flying, making him scream in pain as he was hurled by the impact. The artifact he had been holding flew through the air, slipping from his hands. The scene was quick and brutal, making it clear that there was no room for mercy. After the battle, the warrior firmly held the cursed object, examining it with a cold gaze. His expression showed contempt as he confronted the defeated man. His voice was filled with repulsion as he questioned the distorted view the man had of women. However, his small companion didn't fail to notice a momentary hesitation in his previous expression. Curious, she suggested that he seemed to have considered the enemy's offer for a moment, which he vehemently denied. Embarrassed by the insinuation, he answered firmly, but his gaze shifted, indicating that the comment had bothered him more than he wanted to admit. In a sudden movement, the chains that held her captive were broken with force, the metal shackles shattered, scattering fragments across the floor. The sound echoed throughout the environment, marking the moment of her liberation. Kneeling, the young woman kept her head lowered, her cheeks flushed. Behind her, a figure dressed in black stood in silence, the one responsible for freeing her. Her body trembled slightly, a mixture of conflicting emotions overwhelming her. She lifted her gaze, staring at her liberator with teary eyes. The young man, with dark hair and elegant attire, approached with concern, his attentive gaze analyzing the situation. He asked if the young woman had been harmed in any way, his serious expression showing a mix of anger and worry. Still leaning against the wall, the girl took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. With a tired but relieved look, she assured him that she was fine, explaining that her captors had not been able to do anything to her. The young man beside her sighed heavily, recognizing that it had been a close call. Meanwhile, another character, visibly surprised, recognized the young woman with astonishment. His eyes widened as he realized he was standing before a legendary figure, unable to hide his admiration. The young woman, in turn, looked up at the man who had rescued her. Her expression mixed gratitude and curiosity as she asked who he was, trying to understand the identity of her savior. The mysterious young man placed his hand on his face, averting his gaze while answering the girl's question. He stated that his name was not important, preferring to describe himself only as a man who had fallen completely in love with her, leaving the declaration hanging in the air. The young woman widened her eyes, surprised by his words. Her face turned bright red, and her hands instinctively went to her face, trying to hide her embarrassment. Her mind seemed unable to fully process such an unexpected confession. Before she could react, the man lifted her into his arms with ease, causing her to let out a surprised scream. Her body stiffened in response to the sudden action, while he maintained a firm and unshakable expression. The young man ran through the illuminated corridors, holding the girl firmly in his arms. He instructed her to hold on tightly, focusing on escaping as quickly as possible. His body moved with precision, determined to get her out of that place without hesitation. In his arms, the young woman looked at his face with a mixture of surprise and emotion. Her racing heart was not just due to the danger, but also from the sense of safety she felt in that moment. Confused thoughts filled her mind as she wondered when was the last time someone had done so much to protect her. She tightened the fabric of her clothes, her gaze fixed on the man holding her. The young man took her to a safe location, a secluded campsite in the forest where a small tent had been set up. Gently, he helped her sit down, explaining that this was his shelter and that she should rest for a while. The girl trembled slightly, her face flushed as she murmured about the intense warmth that overtook her body. She seemed fragile, her body exhausted after everything she had gone through. While she settled down, the young man observed in silence, reflecting on his mission. Now that she was safe, he felt he had fulfilled his duty. However, within him, a conflict arose. He knew he needed to leave, but the idea of leaving her there tormented him. He waited for the right moment, planning to leave as soon as she fell asleep. However, before he could act, a sudden movement made her let out a surprised scream, interrupting his thoughts. Inside the tent, an unexpected movement caused the young woman to lose her balance, falling awkwardly onto the young man. The impact put them in an embarrassing position, both surprised by the unusual situation. The girl, still slightly dizzy from the warmth she felt, tried to understand what had happened, while her face turned even redder. The young man, on the other hand, remained still for a moment, realizing how complicated the position was. He quickly tried to compose himself, feeling that this could become a major problem. His expression showed a mix of nervousness and desperation as he tried to handle the situation in the best way possible. The situation inside the tent took an unexpected turn when the young woman, still visibly shaken and exhausted, lost control and fell onto the young man. Her body trembled, and her breathing quickened, showing the effort she was making to stay firm. The young man, surprised by her unexpected strength, was immobilized beneath her weight. He tried to react but realized he couldn't move, shocked by the power she possessed. As he struggled to understand the situation, he began to associate what he saw with the stories that circulated about her, realizing he was facing someone incredibly powerful. Even without the strength to react, his mind tried to absorb the reality of this unusual experience. During the night, the small creature accompanying the group observed the tent with a mix of curiosity and surprise. Intense sounds came from inside, and it couldn't hide its reaction. Its face flushed as it tried to understand the situation, showing a mix of disbelief and fatigue. Time passed, and the creature wondered when all of this would end. With a resigned sigh, it realized its wait was taking longer than expected, leading it to question how they still had so much energy. As dawn approached, the environment around remained calm, the starry sky silently witnessing the night. When the sun began to rise, the small observer finally expressed its surprise, realizing that the movement inside the tent had not ceased. At dawn, the young woman awoke and, upon noticing the situation around her, placed her hands on her face, overwhelmed with shock. Her gaze showed a mixture of disbelief and confusion as she tried to process everything that had happened. The small creature in the corner of the tent watched the scene with wide eyes, concerned about its master's condition. The young man, on the other hand, lay visibly exhausted but with a satisfied smile on his face. With a calm gesture, he joined his hands in a sign of gratitude, expressing his happiness for what had transpired. The small creature, still not fully understanding the situation, simply observed his unexpected reaction. The young woman, visibly shaken, kneeled before the young man, her face filled with regret. With tears in her eyes, she apologized repeatedly, explaining that, although an external factor might have influenced her behavior, she still felt guilty for forcing someone so young like him to go through that. The young man watched her in silence, sitting before her, unsure of how to react. While she continued her confession, acknowledging that she had lost control even after being saved from the bandits, her tone conveyed deep remorse. Lowering herself even further, she promised to do anything to make up for her mistakes, demonstrating her sincerity as she apologized. The young man, still processing the situation, reflected on what he should do next. The young man, now more relaxed, reflected on everything that had happened. Unlike the young woman, who was drowning in regret, he didn't see a need for guilt. With a serene and confident expression, he admitted to himself that he had enjoyed every moment of the previous night, without any regrets. Meanwhile, the small creature beside him observed the scene with a mixture of disbelief and exasperation, unable to understand the young man's carefree attitude. Even with his calm demeanor, he recognized that the situation was not as simple as he made it appear. However, seeing the girl still kneeling before him, he asked her to lift her head, showing that he held no grudges. The young man kept a serious expression while trying to reassure the young woman. To him, what had happened was not something that bothered him, treating everything as a simple accident. His expression showed determination, making it clear that he saw no need for her to feel so guilty. However, his response was not well received. The young woman, still deeply shaken, reacted strongly, refusing to accept his carefree view of the events. Her sudden movement made the atmosphere even more chaotic, leaving her completely embarrassed as she realized her own impulsiveness. Meanwhile, the small creature watched the scene from a distance, trying to understand the emotional exchange between the two. The young woman sat down, still shaken, while reflecting on everything that had happened. She recognized the young man's identity, remembering his position as the future leader of an important family. Her expression was one of guilt and regret, feeling deeply uncomfortable with the situation. With a sad look, she mentioned that she had a daughter the same age as him, making everything even harder for her to accept. The weight of her actions made her question how he felt about everything, fearing that he might harbor resentment. The young man, on the other hand, didn't show much concern. To him, there was no need for her to torture herself over this. His carefree attitude contrasted with the seriousness of the woman, who was still trying to understand her own feelings amid the whirlwind of emotions. The young man kept a firm posture, looking directly at the woman, making it clear that he had no regrets. On the contrary, he stated that he had enjoyed the experience, even surprising the small creature accompanying them. The woman, still embarrassed, tried to deny her own insecurity, insisting that he had shown more than enough of his energy and determination. Her flushed face made it evident how embarrassed she was by the conversation. However, her guilt still tormented her, and she decided that she needed to compensate him in some way. Before she could think better about her words, her declaration made him react quickly, trying to correct the misunderstanding. The small creature observed the conversation between the two, noticing the woman's discomfort and the young man's reluctance. He pondered the need for any form of compensation, stating that he saw no reason for her to insist so much on it. However, the floating creature suggested that he accept a favor in return, arguing that it would help relieve the woman's conscience. Its explanation made the young man think for a moment, considering the idea. Still thinking, he murmured about the possibility of asking for a favor, pondering what he could request. Meanwhile, the image of the great mansion of the Tridal family appeared in his mind, suggesting that maybe there was something to be gained in this situation. In front of a vast green field, the young man approached the woman, determined in his request. He expressed his desire to be trained by her, demonstrating conviction in his words. The woman, surprised, questioned whether he was truly sure of this decision. Her look reflected uncertainty, but also curiosity at the young man's determination. He explained that he had been training hard for 2 months but felt that there was a limit to what he could learn on his own. To him, there was no one more qualified than her, whose skills with both sword and magic were undeniably exceptional. She remained silent for a moment, evaluating the situation. The request was unexpected, but at the same time, it awakened something inside her. After all, being seen as a master was something she had never imagined until that moment. The woman, after a brief moment of reflection, accepted the young man's request. However, she made it clear that, even so, she didn't think it was enough to compensate for what had happened between them. The young man thanked her politely, maintaining his respectful demeanor. Meanwhile, the small creature accompanying them celebrated excitedly, thrilled that he now had a powerful mentor. Before the training began, the woman made sure to clarify something important. She revealed that, over the years, many influential nobles had asked to be trained by her. However, she had turned down all the offers and had never accepted a disciple before. As she said this, her image blended with a memory of past battles, where she demonstrated her exceptional skills. Now, for the first time, she had agreed to teach someone, making this moment unique for both of them. The training began without warning. The woman charged with impressive speed, striking the ground with force and lifting a cloud of dust. Her gaze was fierce and determined, with no intention of going easy. The young man barely had time to react when he saw her advance with sword in hand. His instincts warned him of the imminent danger, but before he could prepare, he was forced to dodge quickly to avoid the strike. With a powerful movement, she sent him flying, making him lose his balance. As he tried to recover, the woman maintained her firm posture and declared that she only knew how to teach through real combat. She emphasized that she had never been a patient or gentle tutor and, for that reason, asked again if he truly wanted to be trained by someone so aggressive.